Hey, what's up, everyone? It's time for Gospel Grit. I know that I've been gone for a couple weeks here. I just was on vacation and I was enjoying it, of course, spending time with my family, but I'm glad to be back, glad to be doing these videos. I'm going to also be doing videos specific to our church. Well, all these are specific to our church, and if others benefit, praise God, but I'll be actually releasing quite a bit of videos, so they'll be shorter in length because I'm trying to produce more videos by number. So today I got a good one for you. I'm not exactly sure where this terminology came from. I've heard it from multiple sources. I think I might know the original source, but regardless, it's a biblical truth. So its original source, it's actually the Bible. It's actually the scriptures, and it's this little phraseology that is commonly used and thrown around, which is said, not whether but which. Not whether but which. And when I first was exposed to this and understood it from the scriptures, it just was completely transformative in the way that I thought, in the terms that I thought, in the standards by which I thought. Because what was happening is I was really beginning to see the reality of what we would call the myth of neutrality. Early on in my Christian walk and even into my Reformed faith, I would say things like, well, yeah, I understand why they don't want to, use God as a standard because da 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 da. Oh yeah, I understand why we shouldn't begin with God because da 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 da. Oh yeah, I get it. We should probably, separate church and state because, we don't want a theocracy, of course. Or we don't want, we shouldn't preach, we shouldn't talk about Christ in education because we want, things like that. Early on in my walk, because of the world that I grew up in, the world that we all grew up in, because of the effects of worldviews that have permeated and been synchronized even within the church, have infiltrated the church, have muddied the waters to think that we can actually have neutrality, that we can actually have an unbiased view of something as it relates to ethics, standards, education, politics, what have you. So this little term, not whether but which, was transformative, and it's really finding its scriptural basis in things like when Christ says in the Gospels, whether it's Mark 12 or Luke 11, he says, "He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters." You also see this elsewhere where you see Paul talking about how Gentiles are darkened in their understanding, how they have futility in their mind. Ephesians 4 talks about this, how they have ignorance in them because of the hardness of their heart. Colossians 2 talks about, "See that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ." James talks about enmity, a friendship with the world is enmity with God. So you see really this light and darkness. There is no neutrality. There is no middle ground. So it's not whether but which. It's not whether a God will be installed and really bowed down to, I should say, in government, but it's which God will be submitted to in government. Will it be the God of Christianity as it should be, or will it be the God of secular humanist? Will it be the God of paganism? Will it be the God of whatever you want to place there? The God of the demos, meaning the God of the people ruling by mob rule. It's not whether a God, it's not whether there'll be a theocracy, but which God will be ruling out in that theocracy, which standard. It's not whether a standard will be implemented, but which standard. And when you arrive to that standard, you'll say, well, who made you the arbiter of that standard? Where do you get your standards from? Where do you get your standards for good and evil? Where do you get your standards for morality? So you see, there's no element, there's nothing in this life that is truly able to be approached neutrally. Either it's beginning with Christ or you begin with man. We just got done doing a worldview training with the youth of our church. We also just did an apologetics class for the college in our church. And and you begin to trace these lines, these thoughts as they go out. You follow the train of thought, you follow the lines that come from a worldview, and you begin to see what ensues after you begin with man and man's standards and man's ever-changing standards and man's ever-changing morality and social understandings. It leads to chaos every time, rather than having an unchanging God who has set the standards for morality, because he is truly the one who is establishing all justice, all morality in his being, and he's unchanging. And when you begin with that, then you see there's order and there's functionality and there's true beauty in all that God does. So when you begin with God, there's beauty and order and true a true created order that we're walking in and living in, and it's designed and it makes sense and it's logical. Why? Because he's it. He's all. He's what we need. And then you have man that always ends in chaos, because man has no objective standard. Man has no objective morality. Man has nothing in and of himself. And when he does, where people begin with man and there's some form of beauty, it's only that because it's going back to the created order, because it's going back to Christ, because it's going back to him. The only time that man makes sense, it's when it's walking according to the created order. So it's not whether a worldview will be pushed, but which. It's not whether agendas will be pushed, but which. It's not whether there'll be indoctrination in education, but which will happen. It's not whether a standard will be used, but which. So we must, as Christians, always begin with understanding and begin in thinking in terms of the lordship of Christ in every sphere of life. And because of the gospel, because Christ is the God of every God, because Christ came to this earth, because Christ came and fulfilled the righteous requirement of the law, because Christ willingly went to the cross, because Christ willingly gave up his life, because Christ resurrected from the dead, because Christ ascended and is exalted and is ruling and reigning on the throne, because all authority has been given to Christ, we must, as Christians, see his authority over all of life, see the myth of neutrality, and say not whether but which. And for Christians, the whether the which is Christ, the which is his word, the which is his standard, his rule, it's his world. So when we as Christians begin to think consistently and logically and apply our entire system of thought to apply the whole counsel of God, we come down to this reality that as Christians, we must take Christ and take him to every sphere of life, because Christ has all authority in heaven and on earth, not whether but which. For the Christian, it must be Christ as a standard and rule for ethics, morality, education, government, politics, art, all of that, because all of that, it's finding its objective truth and reality in God. Where man catches a little glimpse of that, it only is the case because of God. Outside of that, chaos, disorder, dysfunctionality, nonsense, absurdity. Wherever that is not happening in man's world, it's only because it's agreeing with God's world. This is Christ's world, church. Let's live our life in light of that. Not whether, but which. There's no neutrality, so Christians, don't leave Christ on the shelf. Take him to every sphere in which you go.